problem. All right, Rabbi Say, let's get started. This week we got Teffilos haderech. We were loaded with questions. Do I have to make it when I go this small distance, long distance, flying, bus, train? Do I have to make it again? I made it one time. What's the story? Could somebody be mic to me? Is it okay over the microphone? I don't remember what they used to do this in camp. Did they really? What's the story? Everybody's confused. Nobody knows whether or not to make a Teffilos haderech. Let's try to get some clarity. Here we go. We'll start with the Gemara in Brachos, which says, quote, Chavtesim Bebeis, Himlech b'koincha v'tzei. My himlech b'koincha v'tzei, Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Chizda, Zu Teffilos haderech. So you should be himlech b'koincha v'tzei. Before you leave, you should be himlech b'koincha. What does that mean? It's not your average terminology, and that's like one of those, lines in the Gemara where you kind of have to check the art scroll, check the Masifta, see what that means. Or we got something actually that existed before the Masifta and art scroll. It's called Rashi, and he says himlech tol rishus. Now, I'm not saying that Rashi is only an art scroll. Don't worry. So tol rishus, you have to ask rishus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, before you go on a journey. And what is that rishus that you ask? It's Teffilos haderech. Zak the Bahag and other Rishonim, it doesn't mean ask rishus, it means make a tefillah. You go and you daven to Hashem that you should be safe on your journey, and then you go on the journey. Lefi Rashi, what exactly are you asking permission for? It's not usually how we go with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we ask permission for things. Usually the way that it works is you go and you do as you do. You don't usually have so many conversations with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu back and forth, right? So what is this asking permission, as Rashi explains? So the tzlach actually has a very interesting pshat. The tzlach says you go and you start saying Teffilos haderech. If it comes out smooth, you don't mumble jumble the words, it goes nicely, so that is your rishus min hashamayim to go on the journey. It's like you have rishus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You go, you ask rishus. However, if you start saying it, you get messed up on the words, you can't remember the next word, you get confused, whatever, that's, so to speak, that you do not have rishus. This is not the mahalach that your average person goes by, but the word tzaddikim, the word chashuv people that did go like this, that if they would start saying Teffilos haderech and they would stumble, they would take that as a siman min hashamayim not to go on the trip. But that is not the standard practice of the average Joe or the average uncle. Now, according to the Rishonim, it's much more understandable, the Bahag and others, that you go and you're saying a tefillah before you go somewhere dangerous, before a yid goes on a trip, he goes and he davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that it should be all good. Now, one should note a little bit of a misconception about Teffilos haderech. Most people think Teffilos haderech, that's a really nice thing. It's cute. From people they say Teffilos haderech, because that's like a nice thing to do. I'm not so from, I'm not such a yeshivish guy, or I don't know. I only say it when I go on the plane. So Teffilos haderech is a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. Like Mikra Megillah is a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. I'm not necessarily saying it's the same level, but it's a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. The Rabbanan will mechayev you that when you go mahalach b'derech, you say Teffilos haderech. We'll see that there's lots of scenarios and situations where it's unclear whether or not you have a chiyuv. But if you have a chiyuv, let's say you're taking a road trip through wherever, dangerous areas, you have a chiyuv l'kuli alma. So you have a chiyuv midrabanan to say Teffilos haderech. It's not just a cute, nice inyan. It is a chiyuv midrabanan. Okay, great. Now, what is Teffilos haderech? Is it a tefillah or is it a bracha? This will be used to answer lots of our questions of how to treat it, because there's a little confusion involved. So what is it? Is it tefillah or is it brachos? You check it up in the siddur. Where do they put it right next to? All the brachos on the yam and the brachos on lightning and the brachos on this and the al mechia and whatever. And then you have Tefillos haderech. For some reason they shtup it with all the brachas. And we end off Baruch Atah Hashem Shemei Tefillah, right? So it sounds a little bracha-like. But on the other hand, it's called Tefillas haderech. It's in the name. And where did the Shulchan Aruch decide to put it? The Shulchan Aruch decided to put it on Kuf Yud. Kuf Yud is Hilchos Tefillah, not Hilchos Brachas. So it seems to be that we are going to treat it as a tefillah, not a bracha, and that's going to be very important to answering some of the questions that we are going to ask momentarily. And furthermore, I would say the Sha'ar Tziyun points out that we do not say Melech HaOlam in the bracha, which is an indication that it's not a bracha. It's just a tefillah. So are women chayiv in Tefillas haderech? First question. Answer, yes. Because it's a tefillah. Not because it's a tefillah, I should say the opposite way. Once you say it's a tefillah, you might suspect that women should not be chayiv, because generally it's debatable whether women are chayiv in tefillah. But over here, women will be chayiv in the Tefillas haderech, because since it is not a time-bound tefillah, the tefillahs of Shachas Mincha Ma'ariv are time-bound, and therefore there's debate. This is not a time-bound tefillah, and therefore women will be chayiv in Tefillas haderech. Now, are you better off having one person be mitzi everybody? One person will be mitzi the whole bus, will be mitzi the whole car. Or are you better off that each individual will say their own Tefillas haderech? So we have two rules that we often discuss in mitzvahs and brachos and etc. We have Roiv Am Hadras Melech versus is a mitzvah to do things by yourself. By brachos, we normally favor Roiv Am Hadras Melech. By tefillah, we do not favor Roiv Am Hadras Melech. We don't say, don't bother saying Shemoneh Esrei today. Just listen to the Shliach Tzibur say his Chazaras Tashatz and be yotze with that. No, if you could say Shemoneh Esrei yourself, you don't let the Shliach Tzibur be yotze you. When it comes to tefillah, the preference is you over somebody being yotze you. Brachos, that's a different story. So therefore, the preference is certainly going to be for everybody to say it by themselves. Now, one may, if anybody's ever been to camp, or trips, school trips, yeshiva trips, camp trips, whatever it is, for some reason we always have somebody being mitzi everybody. What's going on? Didn't they hear my shiur that I just gave 30 seconds ago? So why are they all doing that? So, a combination of a couple of reasons. One might be a little amaratzitz, but there might be another good reason as well. It is better for one person to be mitzi others than others not saying it. so being mitzi is better than it just not happening. So if you could look around at the crowd and say, okay, tachlis is they're not going to all say it, then I would agree that being mitzi them is better than them not saying it. But if you're a part of a crowd where the reality is that they all really could say it, you're better off for each individual to say it. Sometimes you'll have somebody being mitzi the driver. Now that's a very reasonable thing, because if the driver is driving, one could argue that he may not have as good kavanah as somebody who's not driving. But
could a lady be mitzi the husband driving?
The lady definitely could be mitzi the husband driving. A lady being mitzi other men in hilchos tefillah would work, but there's hilchos snias issues in a woman being mitzi other men. But in a woman being mitzi her husband, there's no snias issues, and therefore she could definitely go ahead and do it, and no problem for her to be mitzi the family. Now, when it is said, and if you are being mitzi everybody, should a microphone be used? And the answer is no. If you write paiskim, it's not your actual voice, and you cannot apply shemea ka'oina because you didn't hear the guy talk. You heard the electrical reproduction of his voice, and therefore, if you write paiskim, that does not work. Now, there's two different ways to do the microphone tefillas haderech shtickle. You could say you're being mitzi everybody. If you're being mitzi everybody, it should be done without the microphone. Oh, but we can't all hear. Okay, so you can have one guy do the front of the bus, and you can have a different guy do the back of the bus. If that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do, and you'll get everybody taken care of, and it'll work fine. There's another mahalach, which is that everybody will say it by themselves, but they don't know it all by heart, and they don't all have siddurim on them, and nobody has smartphones in their pockets. So how are they going to say it? So, what? So how are they going to say Tefillos haderech? So one mahalach is that somebody could say it out loud, and each person could say it with them word by word. If you're doing that mahalach, then doing it over the microphone is not a problem, because he's not actually being mitzi anybody. He's just telling them the words. So that would be a mahalach. Fine. Now, if I already said Tefillos haderech, am I allowed to now go and be mitzi somebody else? I was already yoitze my chiyuv of Tefillos haderech. Am I allowed to be mitzi somebody else? So you're only really allowed to go now and be mitzi somebody else if that individual is not capable of doing it by themselves. If that individual is not capable of doing it by themselves, then you could be mitzi them. But if they are capable of doing it by themselves, they should do it. If they don't know the words and you know the words, you could be mitzi them. Next, when there is a suffix, whether or not you said Tefillos haderech already. So what's the story? How do you go about doing it again? So just hold on 1 second. Okay, so weiter. So what if there's a suffix, whether or not you said Tefillos haderech? So if it was a bracha, what would we say? We would say suffix brachas lahakol, and you don't go and say it again. But since it's a tefillah, we should apply the principle that, when you're in suffix, whether or not you said a tefillah, you do say it again. So since we say that, so we're saying that Tefillos haderech is a tefillah, then you will say Tefillos haderech again. Now, Rav Elyashiv and Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky say further. They say based on a Pnei Yeshua that, think about it. If you're in suffix, whether or not you need to say Tefillos haderech, you should say it. Why? What's the worst case that's happening? You said a tefillah. What's wrong with a tefillah? Let's say you weren't really chayiv in it. You weren't. There was no chiyuv of saying Tefillos haderech, and you said Tefillos haderech. Did you do anything wrong? No. You said Tefillos haderech. Ma baya. And therefore, it would not be a problem. Now, some are noig that in a case, some are not noig like this Rav Elyashiv and Rav Kamenetsky of what in suffix whether or not you're chayiv. And by the way, the suffix is going to be very common. It's often very difficult to figure out the mitzias of if this journey was chayiv in Tefillos haderech or not. So, Zot Rav Elyashiv and Rav Kamenetsky say it anyways. Who cares? Some are noig that when you're in the case of suffix, to add into your Shema Kolenu in the Shemoneh Esrei before you leave. Or maybe best if you have the Shemoneh Esrei right by the rest stop, you catch the minion by the rest stop. Certain places like, on Thursdays going from Brooklyn to the upstate New York, they have certain rest stops that everybody knows you catch mincha. So if you have places like that, that's really good, great place to fit it in. Then you would go and you would fit it into Shema Kolenu. The reason why it's actually very good putting Tefillos haderech in Shema Kolenu, it fits like a glove, is because they both end with the Baruch Atah Hashem Shemei Tefillah. And therefore, since they both end with the Baruch Atah Hashem Shemei Tefillah, it fits like a glove into Shema Kolenu. So that's some are noig that, and some are noig to say it in the cases of suffix without Shem Malchus. So any of these mahalchim are we would call valid. And Svara, I really like what Rav Elyashiv and Rav Kamenetsky say, because what's wrong with davening? What's wrong with the tefillah? Even if you're not actually mechoyev. Now, maybe I would say like this. I think this is actually how I'd be noita. If you are being mechaven in your Tefillos haderech, then yes, say it Shem Malchus. if you're actually mechaven Hashem, and you have in your mind, I know, everybody's supposed to have it in mind every time they have every tefillah and every bracha, everybody's supposed to have 100% kavanah. Somebody once told me, I heard that there are some people out there that don't always have kavanah when they daven every tefillah and every bracha. So, if it's true that what I heard, that sometimes not everybody always has kavanah, so I would say it like this. If you know you're going to be able to be mechaven to say tefillah haderech properly, then do it with shem malchus, a proper tefillah. But if you're just going to rip through the words without actually having kavanah, then maybe do it without the shem malchus. I think that would be my personal natiyah.
So what do you say?
Yeah, you should try to have kavanah and say it with shem malchus.
How do you do it without Shem Malchus? Just
Baruch atah Hashem. Say Hashem. Yeah. Fine. Now the Gemara asked ad kama. And for how long? For how much? And the Gemara asked Amar Reb Yaakov, Amar Reb Chizda, ad parsa. So you say tefillah haderech ad parsa. What does that mean? It's a very vague Gemara. So Rashi understands it to mean that you should say tefillah haderech within the first parsa of your journey. Within the first parsa of your journey, you say tefillah haderech. When does your journey start? Your journey starts from whenever you leave the city. That first parsa, you should say tefillah haderech. And if you didn't say it in the first parsa, Zok Rashi, it's too late. And you can no longer say tefillah haderech. The Bahag, which is quoted in Rashi, and most other Rishonim, they learn totally different. They say the ad kama question of the Gemara is, how long of a journey is mechuyev in tefillah haderech? And if the journey is up to a parsa, you don't need to say tefillah haderech. More than a parsa, you have to say tefillah haderech. Okay, the Bahag and other Rishonim seem very reasonable. It's giving a shiur for how long the journey needs to be to say tefillah haderech. Rashi, what's pshat? What's going on? Why in the world, just because I'm going for a 50 parsa journey, just because I missed the first parsa, why should I not say tefillah haderech? I still have 49 parsa to go. So, if we go back and remember what Rashi said earlier, it all makes perfect sense. Rashi said, what is tefillah haderech with Shitas Rashi? Asking rishus. After you're already left and you're already on your journey, it's a chutzpah to ask rishus once you're already left. So that, if you already left without asking rishus, you're already a parsa into your journey. Sorry, you lost your chance. It's too late. Don't ask a chutzpahdik rishus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Bahag and other Rishonim, it's about a tefillah for safety. Tefillah for safety, you can always ask for a tefillah for safety. You can always have a tefillah for safety, and therefore you just ask, it's not a problem. So, fine. Now, how do we paskin? So, me'ikar we paskin like the Bahag, which is that we can say tefillah haderech at any point along the journey. However, it's better to say earlier in general because you might as well have your tefillah go on more of the journey. And you should try to do it in the first parsa because why not be able to be yotze shitas Rashi as well? If it doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt. So you try to do it in the first parsa since leaving the city. Now, how long is a parsa? So a parsa is 4 mil. Okay, that didn't help. How long is a mil? So a mil is around 2/3 of a mile or around a kilometer, depending on whichever metric system you use listening to me. How long does that work out? Just, basics. So according to Reb Chaim Noah, it's usually the shorter shiur. That's 2.4 miles or 3.8 kilometers. According to the Chazon Ish, that is 2.8 miles or 4.6 kilometers. And that is a parsa. That is the distance that you have to travel. And the count starts once you leave the city. We'll discuss what exactly that means, leave the city, in a minute. But the count starts once you leave the city. Now, in the time of Chazal, how long does it take to walk 4 parsa? 4 mil, which is a parsa. How long does it take to walk a mil? So Chazal say it takes 72 minutes to walk a parsa.
4 mil.
4 mil. Each meal is 18 minutes, 72 minutes. So what is Chazal saying? Are they saying a distance? So you are only chayav tefillas haderech if the trip is the physical distance of a parsa? Or are they saying if you take a distance that takes the amount of time that it takes to travel a parsa, i.e. a trip of 72 minutes? Well, what's nafkamina? Well, nafkamina is huge because you're not always walking. Nowadays, there's some people that travel by car, right? And plane and train and bus and everything else. Electric bike. So, if you're traveling by car, if you only need a parsa, you can do a parsa in 3 minutes on the highway. No problem. But, so do we say that you're chayav tefillas haderech when you go 3 minutes on the highway? Or do we say you're chayav tefillas haderech when you are in the first 72 minutes of your journey? Or when your journey is going to last for more than 72 minutes would be maybe a little more accurate way of saying it. And trying to do the lichatchila of Rashi. Is the lichatchila of Rashi the first 72 minutes of the journey? Or is the lichatchila of Rashi the first 3 minutes of drive, which took you a parsa? So obviously tremendous nafkaminas. So how do we paskin? So if you look at the Mishnah Brura discussing the Tefillos Yadayim, which by the way has the same shiur parsa, if it's going to take you another parsa longer trip before you get to a place that you can wash your hands, you have to wait if it's within a parsa. And the Mishnah Brura explains there that we don't mean physical distance, we mean time. If you're in a horse and buggy and you're going to get there within 72 minutes, then you cannot eat yet. You have to wait until you get to that 72-minute mark. Over here, the Mishnah Brura does not specify and does not bring down that we're talking about time. Therefore, the poskim at large make a diak from the Mishnah Brura, and they say, by Tefillas Yadayim, it's a vart in time. You have 72 minutes. But over here, it's a vart in distance, and therefore you have a parsa. And even if you're going by horse and buggy or car, if you get past the parsa in 4 minutes, you'll have to say tefillas haderech. Steer in the Mishnah Brura. Why is that? Why would they say that? Now it's actually quite mistaber, because when it comes to the Tefillas Yadayim, we're discussing level of tircha. Level of tircha is probably dependent on time of travel. Whereas when we're discussing Tefillas haderech, there's a concept that outside of the cities represents a place of danger. And therefore, I don't care how long it takes you to get there, but once you get to this dangerous area, which is out in the wilderness, it's a parsa out of the city, parsa of traveling out of the city, you're in a makom of danger, and therefore it's logical that you would require tefillas haderech. But to note, Rav Ovadia Yosef, he paskins that you're only chayav to say tefillas haderech on a trip that is 72 minutes from exiting the city. So he actually does learn it as a time requirement. I don't know if the minhag among Sfardim is to be seimach in this Rav Ovadia, but that is what Rav Ovadia says. Okay. Now, Lamaisa, as we just pointed out, the reason that Tefillas haderech was instituted was to protect us from these dangerous bandits, listim mizoyim v'chayas rois baderech. Yeah, so it was dangerous outside of the city. The Gemaras talk about bandits being in the crossroads between cities. It was the dangerous place. So the question is, what about nowadays? When I'm traveling from Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak, there's a couple of examples that the poskim always talk about. There's like 3 billion different places that you could go. But the poskim in Eretz Yisrael all talk about from Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak. The poskim in America talk about from like Brooklyn to Lakewood. We don't know so much about so many other journeys. I don't know. But so it's going to be hard to answer. Like somebody asked me yesterday, what about, they saw the sign go up and what the share was on. What about going from Yerushalayim to Kivat Zev? I'm like, I have no idea like what the route is like. I actually looked at a map a little bit today to try to get an idea, but we have to examine each individual place. But the place can like talking about the Eretz Yisrael place can like talking about Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak. They all have what to say on this. And as I said, America, I saw a bunch of people talking about Brooklyn to Lakewood, and Brooklyn to Muncie. I saw also. Okay, so Lamaisa, it goes like this. So from Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak, should you have to say Tefillas haderech? Zakt Shlomo Zalman, no list of mezuyim, no chayes rois baderech. There's cars. There's always cars around. You're not in the middle of nowhere by yourself. There's cars around. You don't need to say Tefillas haderech by going from Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak. Why should you have to say? It doesn't resemble the takana. However, he does point out if you're going and you're driving through an Arab area, then you have to say Tefillas haderech. That's a case of list of mezuyim. And if there's list of mezuyim, you have to say Tefillas haderech. Now, the Chazon Ish, he argues, the Chazon Ish says that you say Tefillas haderech nowadays for the dangers of car crashes. There's other dangers. Maybe there isn't the dangers that Chazal was specifically worried about, but there's other dangers that are certainly out there, and therefore Tefillas haderech would still be required. Rav Aaron Cutler, he used to say that chayes rois are referring to truck drivers. Whatever out there is included. So most poskim l'maisa say we say Tefillas haderech based on our modern dangers. The wild drivers, potentially, could be chayes rois. Well, list of mezuyim. I don't know, maybe, those cops that wait at the bottom of the hill and then they change the speed limit from 65 to 55 right on the top of the hill, and you go flying down and they're waiting on the bottom of the hill with a speed gun, and they get you. I would say maybe those are listed mezuyim. They go over to your car, they have a gun on them, Maybe those are listed mezuyim, giving you tickets. So maybe you could be mechaven them for the list of mezuyim in the Tefillas haderech. Actually, interestingly enough, there's a question about could you add in your own girsa into Tefillas haderech? Am I allowed to add in? I want to add in, list of mezuyim v'chayes rois v'mishtara v'aravim. Could I add in Arabs and cops into the Tefillas haderech? So the Maisa, the Rav Chaim Kanievsky says no. If Chazal made a girsa, you can't change it. Rav Shlomo Zalman and Rav Elyashiv say sure. If it's a tefillah, you're allowed to be mevakesh from HaKadosh Baruch Hu what you want, and you can add them in to the Tefillas haderech. So if you want to add in Tefillas haderech, you certainly could. I think you'll catch the attention of your kids and your other passengers much more when you add in that to the Tefillas haderech. Maybe you'll stir up a shtickle more kavana in yourself in the olam. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it could be done. Okay. Now, when do we start counting that parsa? How do you know? We said, as I mentioned before in passing, the parsa, you start counting the parsa from when you leave the city. What does that mean, leaving the city? So it used to be very simple. You used to have cities, little small towns, big open areas, and then much later on, little small towns. And there's plenty of places in America that's still the case. But nowadays, it's become much more complicated to know when a city ends, because a lot of the populated areas in the world, whether it's New York, whether it's Yerushalayim areas, they're very populated, and you kind of go from city to city. What does it count? But when do you say this city's over? So simply speaking, when there's a large gap from the end of the housing. There was housing, and now there is no more housing. There's a significant gap. Once there's a significant gap, you say that the city is over, and you can start counting the parsa. And it's okay, by the way, if there's houses in the middle of the parsa, it's fine. You don't need a parsa of cleared space. But when I said there needs to be a significant open area, what does significant open area mean? So it's going to be very difficult for me to give you a X amount of meters or X amount of feet is going to be a clear open space. Because let's just think about it for a second. If you're coming from Brooklyn area, New York City, I don't know the numbers, but a certain amount of feet is going to be very significant. It's going to be, this is the end of this area. This is the end of the city. Whereas if you're driving around Muncie, where things are naturally much more spread out, and from one house to their neighbor is, people use the term, 70 amas. Sometimes in Muncie you have 70 amas between every house and their neighbor. And it's not mistaber to say that after every house the city's over. The city isn't over in Muncie between every house. That the nature of the area is that it's spread out. So you're going to have to say that something that for that area is wide enough that we all get the feeling that the area is over. And I know if I use the word feeling, that's not very scientific, and I apologize, I don't have a scientific number to give you, because it's going to vary from place to place. But it's whatever amount is going to give that hargasha. We're done with this city, this town is over. When there's no houses for a significant stretch. Okay. Fine. Now, what if you are traveling upstate New York, the bungalow colonies? You're traveling from, I'm going from my bungalow colony in Hurleyville to a different bungalow colony going Woodburn. I'm going to Woodburn. For those that know what I'm talking about, great. If not, I'll explain. So we're talking about a 6-minute drive, a 7-minute drive, if I remember correctly. However, I'm switching towns. I was in the town of Hurleyville. Now I'm in the town of Woodburn. And, they have a different little mayor guy with all his, big power. And it's a different town. Have I traveled? It's only been a 6-minute drive, but, there's old. I definitely traveled to Parsa in these roads. So I traveled to Parsa. It's a different name, this town. There was no houses. There was, I definitely had after the bungalow colony, there was definitely open space that there weren't houses. So, do I say Tefillos haderech? So Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says yes. You say Tefillos haderech. Now this is going to get kind of weird because you're going to be saying Tefillos haderech when you go for a little 6-minute drive without traffic, during the day. Not much. It sounds a little funny. The Maisa of the Minhag HaOlam is not to say Tefillos haderech, even though Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky said yes. Let me give a Eretz Yisrael idea for those that aren't familiar with the mountains. Let's say I want to go from Yavneel to the Kinneret. I looked it up today. From Yavneel to the Kinneret is a 10-minute drive. Right? Is there a different mayor by the Kinneret area and Yavneel? Yes. Is it a different city? It's a different city, yes. Have you gone to Parsa? Yes. Was it a 10-minute drive that the people in Yavneel, most of them do every day without thinking about it? Yes. So how are you going to treat that? So the would be the same thing. I think the minhag of people going from Yavneel to the Kinneret would not make it Tefillos haderech. I think the minhag seems to be, by a simple, no-sweat, quick drive that you don't feel like you are traveling anywhere, we will not make Tefillos haderech. Now, if somebody wants to make Tefillos haderech on that drive, they certainly could, because when you actually plug it into the klolim, it seems that you should make it. But it seems to be the minhag is we do not make it by a simple, no-sweat, don't feel like you're even traveling drive. What if you are hiking in the woods? A lot of people don't make Tefillos haderech, but I think this really should be Tefillos haderech. I think they just don't think about it. If you're hiking in the woods or some hike or whatever it is, if you are going to travel a parsa, then you should make a Tefillos haderech. I think it's pretty simple. What about a plane ride? Should you make Tefillos haderech when you are going on a plane ride? So in Svara, yeah, why not? You're traveling, right? Why wouldn't you make it Tefillos haderech? But some want to say that flying on a plane isn't really included in the takana of Chazal. That's not what Chazal were mechaven to. They were mechaven to a plane ride. If a plane ride was around at the time of Chazal, they would have been included that in the takana, but that's not what they were talking about. I think it's a pretty hard svar to hear, because they said travel. Travel's travel. And you tell me the same thing, they didn't mean cars, they didn't mean... It seems to be unlikely, but whatever. There are those that want to say such. They say it's a little debatable whether the story really happened or didn't happen, but a lot of people say this did happen, so we're going to go with it. They asked the Rogachover, when you fly in a plane, by the way, the Rogachover was nifter in 1938. So, I don't know how many plane rides he took himself, but plane rides existed at that point. We know Rabbi Chanan, by the way, already took a plane ride in the 1930s to go to America. Actually, they asked Rabbi, I think it might even be from Rabbi Chanan that he might have said this svar, which that scares me. If it's from Rabbi Chanan, I don't want to talk against the svaras of Rabbi Chanan. I don't want to turn into like a pile of bones or anything. But I'm referring to the sugyas of the Tanaim where somebody spoke against somebody that's miles above them, and it didn't work out so well for them. I'm scared to say anything in svar against Rabbi Chanan, but I just don't hear it, and I hear all the right poskim that would say that it's included in the Gezerah of Chazal. Now the Rogachover, when he was asked, what did the Rogachover say? Apparently it was somewhat of a Talmud Chacham that asked the Rogachover, do you say Tefillas haderech on a plane? And he replied, if you know a little bit about the Rogachover, you'll appreciate his answer. Am haaretz, Am haaretz, don't you know? It's a Gemara. It's a Gemara in Chulin, Daf Lametes. Chulin Lametes. That's all the Rogachover answered. You want to know what I mean? Do your own homework. This Talmud Chacham didn't know what he was talking about, so he had to open up a Chol Namates, because it's not even the Sugya Tefillas Derech in Chol Namates, what sheikhs. So if you open up this Chol Namates, you'll see that it's talking about the Sugya of Shluch HaKen. So in the sugya of Shluch HaKen, where you send away the mother bird and you pick up the eggs or little baby chicks from the little baby birds, so it says, the Gemara asks seemingly a hypothetical question. If there was a ken in the air, in Shemayim, and you were flying through the air, would you have a chiyuv in Shluch HaKen? And the Gemara answers that the pasuk says if you come across a cane, if you come across the nest, haderech, then you do shluch HaKen. That's haderech and not flying through the air, not in Shemayim. Haderech and lo Shemayim. So that the Rogachover, it's a mefurish Gemara in Chulin. You could see from the Gemara in Chulin that you're only chayav tefillas haderech haderech, and flying through the air is not haderech. And therefore, when you're flying through the air, you are not chayiv in tefillas haderech. There's two guys on the plane, and one of them was, has Gemara he was learning, and he turns to the next guy, he's watching a movie. So he says, Rabbi Yid, why are you watching a movie? So he gave the famous answer, Torah lo b'shamayim. Says, okay, fine, but I don't really like that answer, whatever. Okay, so but l'maisa, you have a chiyuv, l'atcha baderech. And the guy watching the movie turns, you don't know the Rogachover? Baderech v'lo b'shamayim. I don't think we're going to take that l'maisa. So, l'maisa, the poskim do not really take on this Rogachover, and the poskim say we do have a chiyuv of the Ravadya says it's narishkeit, and the Rogachover never would have said such a thing. I don't know, true or not true, I can't tell you. L'maisa, the poskim aren't really so choshish for the Rogachover, and the poskim say that we will still make a tefillas haderech flying in the plane. However, many poskim, I know where Pam advises and others, the best time to make it is while you're speeding down the runway.
Take off?
During takeoff. Why? Because you don't have the issue of the Rogachover, because you're on the ground. You're traveling on the ground. And this traveling on the ground, by the way, is usually like around the parsah anyways. It's a pretty long distance, the runway. So you're traveling on the ground, Why not? That's the best time to do it, and you'll be able to get the Rashi, Shita's Rashi, of doing it in the initial part of your trip, as well as you don't run into the problems of the Ragat Shavar. So, seemingly that would be the most lichatchila time to make the tefillas haderech is when you're speeding down the runway. L'maisa, if you missed it and you're already in the air, yes, you can make tefillas haderech and it's okay. What if you feel that you are going to, I do this sometimes, I'll fall asleep on the plane before takeoff. I have a trick. By the way, if anybody wants a beautiful trick to fall asleep on the plane before takeoff, it's you don't sleep a lot during the nights ever, and then when you get onto a plane and you sit down, you fall asleep. Trust me, it works. So sometimes I fall asleep before tefillas haderech, and if I think that's going to happen, you can already, when the plane starts taxiing away from the gate, you could already at that point start saying tefillas haderech. Your journey has, so to speak, started. But also, I just want to note a simple point, which I maybe neglected, is that if the drive to the airport would require tefillas haderech, depending on where you're driving from, then you'll say the tefillas haderech already in the car ride, and that will count including the plane ride to your final destination, because it's one journey. And if you're having a stopover for a couple hours, same thing. That will be one long trip, and you're just going to make the initial tefillas haderech. You won't make a second tefillas haderech on your second leg of your journey. However, if you're sleeping over somewhere for a night and you're starting out on a new day, then you would make a tefillas haderech. Okay, what about a multi-day trip? So by a multi-day, let's say I'm driving to Florida. I'm driving from New York to Orlando, and it's going to be, a 20-hour drive. Now, I know it's possible to do it in one day, but, I don't want to do that, understandably. So I'm going to, leave at whatever time, 10 o'clock. I'm going to get at 10 p.m., I'm going to get to a hotel in, South Carolina or something like that, and sleep there for the night. So then I will wait until I leave the city from New York, make my tefillas haderech, and then in the morning when I wake up, I will make a new tefillas haderech, even if I'm in the middle of the city at South Carolina. There I do not need to leave the city because I am already on my journey. But a new tefillas haderech will be required there in the morning. However, let's say I decided that, I'm going to leave whatever time, and I'm just going to rip it through. I'm going to drive the whole time. Now, I get tired, and I pull over to a rest stop, I sleep in my car for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then I wake up, it's the next morning, whatever it is, and I continue my drive, then I will not require a new tefillas haderech. If I slept over in a hotel, it's a new day, new tefillas haderech, new trip. If I slept in my car for an hour and a half, then I would not require a new tefillas haderech. Okay, next. Now, lichatchila, it's already brought down. It's from the Gemara, sheet in the Gemara. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Lichatchila, you should be standing while saying tefillas haderech. Lichatchila, you shouldn't be moving while saying tefillas haderech. So, sounds like the best thing to do is pull over to the side of the road, get out of your car, and say tefillas haderech. It appears to me that is not the minhag in Klal Yisrael, even if it's the most lichatchila. If somebody wants to do it, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But that does not seem to be the minhag. If there's a tircha, the place can bring down, if there's a tircha to do such, you certainly don't need to. Happens to be where Moshe Sternbach brings down that is the right thing to do. You should pull over to the side and get out of the car and say tefillas haderech, etc. But once again, it clearly seems that is not the minhag in Klal Yisrael. Now, I would say that if and the Chazon Ish already says it, so actually I don't need to say it, because the Chazon Ish says it. If you're on a bus or a train, then you should stand up and say tefillas haderech. If you could. I'm not talking about if you're an old person and it's dangerous, anything like that, then stay seated. But if it's no biggie for you to stand up and say it on the train or bus, then you should stand up to say Tefillos haderech. One more point that I wanted to mention earlier just came back to me now about the idea of how you kind of have like a chiyuv of saying Tefillos haderech. There's a story that's brought in, I think the story flies from different towns in Europe, so I'm not sure which town it started and which town that ended, if it ever really happened, etc. I don't really know. But there's a story that there was a guy by tzedakah that Yer Shemayim, he would do it for free. He would collect tzedakah from places and give it out to the poor. Once it happened, people knew he was a guy by tzedakah. An armed listed mezuyim met him in the on the road and robbed him. Said, "We'll kill you. Give us the money, and we'll kill you." Now let's think about it. Let's get our Baba minds back on. Yeah, Nezikin. So if you have a shomer chinam and you have listed mezuyim, he's pater, right? So he knew the Gemara also this guy. He knew he was pater, but he decided, he wanted to clear for himself and for others, clear his name. So he brought himself to Bezdin, this guy by tzedakah, just to make sure he's in the clear in this story. So he told Bezdin the story. Bezdin said, "Yeah, it's shomer chinam, sure, list the mezuyin, you're good." And then one of the dayanim, as he was walking out, said, "Wait, one question. Did you say Tefillos haderech?" And this guy by tzedakah said, "I actually forgot to say Tefillos haderech." So the dayan said, "Oh, then you were pesheah. You're pesheah, now you're chayav to pay." So it's an amazing story. I don't know if it's true. I actually find it surprising if a Bezdin would actually pass in that way, but who am I? I'm not a dayan. But just to give you an idea and a thought of the expectation and the chiyuv of saying Tefillos haderech and the fact that it actually provides us shmira. Okay, now one more point. The Maram Rattenberg, this is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, that the Maram Rattenberg pointed out that Tefillos haderech doesn't have, it only has an ending bracha, it doesn't have a beginning bracha. Now, once again, if it's a tefillah, it's not really an issue, but if it's a bracha, maybe it should have a beginning bracha and an ending bracha. So he brings down the inyan and the idea to start off, say, a bracha before you say the Tefillos haderech, and therefore, so to speak, begin and end with a bracha. So as the Mishmura quotes the Magen Avram, it's a good idea to say a Asher Yotzer or a bracha achroina, a bar nefashos, a bracha achroina, before starting the Tefillos haderech. And that way, it starts with a bracha and ends with a bracha. Some want to be medayik and ask, why did the Mishnah bring down this Magen Avram? Why did the Magen Avram say a bracha achroina before saying the Tefillos haderech? And just to be clear what I mean, you make a bar nefashos, and right the second you finish the bar nefashos, you start Yehi Ratzon Milfanecha, and you go straight into the Tefillos haderech. Now, why did the Magen Avram say a bracha achroina as opposed to a bracha rishona? Why don't you make a shahakal on your coffee and then your Yehi Ratzon? Why a bracha achroina? So someone explained that a bracha rishona wouldn't work because you have to make a hefsek. You have to drink a little bit. You have to drink a little bit of your coffee. And once there's a hefsek in between the bracha rishona and the Tefillos haderech, that doesn't count as the beginning and closing with the bracha. The Meister of Shlomo Zalman says it's okay. He says it still counts. The Chazon Ish wasn't makbid on this whole inyan altogether of saying a bracha beforehand. L'maisa, if it's easy, you should say a bracha beforehand and then the Tefillos haderech and close with a bracha. If it's not easy, don't worry about it. It's okay. Now, Reb Chaim Kanievsky says that if you don't have the girsa clear, you're going somewhere, and you don't have a sitter with you. Reb Chaim Kanievsky doesn't expect you to have a smartphone with you, I guess, and you don't have the girsa of Tefillos haderech. So he says you could do a more or less version of Tefillos haderech Even if you missed a couple of words out here and there, but if you do a more or less version, that will be okay. Now, everybody say it can't sound like al michya. You know what I'm saying? It has to be like, more or less tefillas haderech. But if you have the more or less version of tefillas haderech, that will count. So now, just to sum up and conclude, when are we going to be saying tefillas haderech? We're going to be saying tefillas haderech whenever you do a journey of a parsa outside the city. What is outside the city? Outside the city is where there's no more houses for a significant period. If it's an area where there are dangerous people, whether it's an Arab area or some areas in South Africa, some areas in Mexico that everybody knows are dangerous areas, then there's all the more reason to say tefillas haderech. If it's an area where it's not dangerous, so once again, you'll certainly need all the houses to stop for a significant amount of time and then have a parsa's distance. The minhag is only to say it by something that is somewhat of a journey. Now, I think if you're driving for an hour, some people want to say, I once heard a claim, which I did not see in the poskim, which when it's a commute, you don't say tefillas haderech. If it's something you do daily, you wouldn't say tefillas haderech. L'maisa, I didn't really see that in the poskim, and l'chayr, you would say tefillas haderech even if it's a hour commute. But we did bring down that the minhag seems to be when it's something which is a 6-minute drive, you're going from Hurleyville to Woodburn, you're going from Yavneel to the Kinneret, which is really a no sweat 6, 7, 10-minute drive. You're not going for an hour, you're not going for 45 minutes. It's just a very short drive. Then l'chayra, the minhag seems to be that there's no tefillas haderech. And I brought down that when you're in Suffolk, whether or not you should say tefillas haderech, the Reb Yoshev and Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky say it anyways. It's a tefillah, it doesn't hurt. Whereas some are noig to add into Shema Kalinu, some are noig to say without Shem Malchus, and in Mitzvah we should all our journeys should be safe from listim nezuim, from chayetz rois, from Arabs on the way, from police on the way, from crazy drivers on the way, and we should all be zeicha to safe travels. Thank you for listening.